Today's guest is PMH Atwater. She is an international authority on near-death experiences and spiritual transformations, and she is an author of 18 books on or related to near-death experiences. And her newest book is The Forever Angels, Near-Death Experiences in Childhood and Their Lifelong Impact. And I just want to add one more thing. She's got great energy. Just wait until you see her. PMH, thank you so very, very much for joining me today. I really appreciate you giving me some of your time.
Oh, it's a privilege and a joy. You know, it's just before Christmas, and it's just great.
Mm-hmm. You know, what's interesting is that you mentioned Christmas, and so I saw a post today that said Christmas is not a season, it's a feeling. What do you think about that?
It's both. It's everything. It's more than that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's great.
All right. Well, my guests love to hear about near-death experiences. So how did you get started in all this?
I died.
Whoa.
Literally,
What happened?
I died. I died 3 times in 1977 while I was pregnant, miscarried, and it was all of those. Just one thing after another happened to me. I died. My first death was January the 2nd, 1977. The second one was January 4, 1977. The third one was March 29. And then later that year, I had 3 major relapses, including total adrenal failure. I was working with a blood pressure reading of 60/60, which means I wasn't doing too good.
Yeah.
And it means I collapsed. In my third near-death experience, I was told by a voice that was so big, it was so huge, it was so... it was just so massive. And I was told by that voice, I called it the voice like none other, because I didn't know what else to call it. And that voice said, and I'm quoting, "Test revelation. You are to do the research, 1 book for each death." It explained to me what that all meant. Book number 1 was not named. I kind of think maybe it was Coming Back to Life, which was my first major book, but I don't know. The second book was Future Memory. And the third book was A Manual for Developing Humans. Both of those books are done. They're out there. Anybody can get them. And then it explained to me what I was to do with my research. And as soon as I was well enough, I began my work. That was in 1978. I met Elizabeth Kubler-Ross at O'Hare Airport. I was there to spend some time with a favorite aunt and uncle, and had a little extra time, and was kind of walking around O'Hare Airport, and I saw Elizabeth Kubler-Ross because I'd seen her pictures, and I walked up to her, introduced myself, and her plane was late going to Europe, so we sat on a bench, just the 2 of us, visiting like a couple of school girls. And I told her about my near-death experience, and she was the one who said I was a near-death survivor. She did not use the word experiencer. She used the word survivor.
Interesting.
And she was the one who told me about the pattern. She never mentioned Raymond Moody's name, never, or his book, nothing. All I had to go on was what she said, and the fact that she validated my experience. And that's all I needed. I was a cop's kid. I was raised in a police station. So I use police investigative techniques as my protocol.
Mhm.
And Dad always said that the body says more than the mouth does. So you're watching bodies. You're watching how they use their shoulders, their arms, their head, their hips. You're watching bodies very carefully, as well as listening to what they say. And Dad was always very, very clear about what people say. Because, let's say there's a given accident. There's an accident. And there are, say, 3 people that watch or saw it. A good cop can only go up to an individual and say, did you see anything? If the individual says car or accident, then and then only can the police officer use that word. So the individual must speak first, must describe things first, not the researcher. And this is one of the one of the problems I have, or one of the it just kind of bothers me with some of this scientific research when you're using you're using these computer programs, and they give you all these questions to ask individuals any given near-death experiencer, and I'm saying to myself, but you're using words before the individual. You cannot do that and get good material. So I'm one of these Jeff, I'm one of these feisty people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I am. I'm a little scrappy.
Mm-hmm. That's okay.
I get out there in the people's homes. I get out there talking, researching the family as well as the individual, the healthcare provider, whoever will talk to me. And I just keep digging and digging and looking and looking and listening and listening, and that's how I do my work. I'm the cop on the beat.
Yeah, the cop on the near-death beat. It sounds It sounds like to me what you were trying to say is that you don't lead the witness, that you wait for them to offer up their information. Is that correct?
No, you bet I don't lead them.
Right.
I ask them what they went through, what they're going through now,
Mm-hmm.
how they're living, what they're thinking, what they're saying, what life is like. You bet. And doing just that opened up doors and all kinds of stories.
Mm-hmm.
All kinds of information, all kinds of observations,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I am now.
When we first started today, you said, and I think you called it the voice. And now in retrospect, do you still call it the voice? And if so, can you identify? You call it the voice like none other.
I call it the voice like none other.
Okay, well, what makes me think?
Yes, I do.
What makes me think is that your newest book is titled The Forever Angels, which kind of gives it a religious tone to me. So is the voice itself?
Not necessarily. Angels are angels. Anybody can see an angel. Doesn't matter where you are. The word angel certainly is more European or something you would find in the United States. If you're in another country, they'll use different terms. But here in this country, we often use the term angel. With little bitty ones, they don't use that term at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's the bright ones or the loving people. They don't use the term angel at all. Usually not until the child is about 5 or 6. Sometimes they'll use that term sooner if they've heard it in the family, or if they've heard it on television or something like that. But your little bitty ones, they don't use that term at all. Now, but we call that. You know, your publisher picks your title, not the author. Your publisher picks the title.
Yeah.
And so we've got the Forever Angels.
I see. What kind of similarities did you see when you were doing your research with children that they would seem to say over and over again?
Well, I want to be really specific here.
All right.
And say, you know, I've done a lot of work with children of various ages, but this book, The Forever Angels, is about the tiny little ones.
Yes.
So this is from birth to the age of 5. And I want to be very specific here because these youngest ones are not like older kids. They're not like tweens and teens. They're not like adults. So, so the kind of material that comes out of really looking at this particular age group. This is 397 people here. So this is a major study. I'm seeing here in doing this that there's a lot of new information, different information, information that really challenges what we think of as the near-death experience. Remember, birth to the age of 5, most of these kids have no before. So there's no way of them comparing anything.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, most of your near-death experiences are about older kids or older people, so they can compare things. But the little bitty ones, they can't compare anything at all. And I was amazed in this study how many remember their birth, how many remember being in the womb. You know, it's like wake up call, you know, wake up here. I had 2 that remembered their conception. They were there when their parents conceived them, and one of them drew a picture of it, and when they were older, and then showed the parents and described everything that the parents were doing, much to the embarrassment of the parents.
Yeah.
And it just rocked their boat, you know. It's just like, what? You were there for conception?
Yeah.
It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
But so many of them remember being in the womb. This case, Penny. Penny was in the womb, and her mother was a smoker. Let me just read this.
Sure.
The most profound memory was my mother smoking. I remember getting excited in utero when she would feel anxious because I knew that the bad taste was coming and soon I would be high. You know, she didn't like her mother smoking at all. So, you know, the kinds of things that they remember, it's like for parents, for the rest of us who are adults, we have to sort of stand back and say, wait a minute here. Whoa. This really challenges what we think of as little bitty ones, babies coming into the world not knowing anything. Laying there in the bassinet, gooing and cooing. What's going through their mind? A lot more than you think that's going through their mind. And it's just fantastic what we as human beings, what we're capable of, what our mind is capable of, what our consciousness beginning in the womb. And we don't forget that. Many times, don't forget that. What I did with this study, 397 people, many of them, the first study I did was back in the 90s, and it was with little bitty ones and going up to maybe their 20s or so. The youngest I actually did research with, kindergarten age. So, and some of them were a little bit younger than that. And you can never have your eyes over the child's eyes. Your eyes must be the same level.
Interesting.
Otherwise, the child will think you're in a power position. So for them to talk to you as an equal, for them to be open to you, you have to have your eyes at the same level they are. So if they're little bitty ones, you know what you're doing. You're on your belly on the floor, working with these little kids. And then the second group that I did about maybe 4 years ago or so, I went after those who were in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, who could remember having had a near-death experience between birth and the age of 5. And I said to them, did having such an experience like this at such a tender age, did that have any effect on your life growing up and, and getting your jobs and careers, getting married and having kids of your own and grandkids? Did it make any difference in your life? I was just, and if it did, tell me about it. So in essence, I was asking for essays, and I was swamped. And some of those essays that came back to me were so tear stained that I could hardly read them. And one woman was very, very specific. And she said, you researchers, you never go for the poor people in poverty. So I made it a point to go for people in poverty. And this one woman had to save up her pennies and dimes and nickels until she could afford the stamps to send me her story. I was just so taken that she would do that. I was just so humbled by the people that spoke, and they had to verify. And this one woman in her 80s, believe it or not, she had a sister that was in her late 60s who could verify her older sister's experience. So that was just an incredible thing. But the clear, sharp memories. Just fantastic. This one guy, he just retired, and he was like 68, 69 years old, and he sent me his essay, and I was just, it was like 50 pages long, complete with photographs of his family. These people were so hungry to talk about their life that I was just bowled over. I was just bowled over by what I was able to find. And it's absolutely going to blow you away. Most of these little ones, they call themselves birthers. I didn't call them that, but they call themselves that. It's like what it's like to be born awake and aware. Think about that. What is it like to be born awake and aware? And most of them were. And you talk about out-of-body experiences. That was normal for them. They would be able to see their parents in another room or see what's going on because they went there. So this idea of out-of-body experiences, that's really quite normal, actually, for little bitty ones. They just were able to keep track of what's going on in that manner. But the kinds of things that happened. I had 3 people in my research base who were raised in voodoo households. They had never heard of the word Bible, never heard of the word Jesus, none of that stuff. Never heard the word God. They were voodoos, voodoo people. And these 3 people, in their near-death experiences, and these are little kids now, were visited by Jesus, and they called Jesus by name. And it's just like, oh, wait a minute here. How did that happen? I had most of these cases came from drownings, high fever, accidents, this kind of thing. I hope you've got some psychologists listening. I hope you have some therapists listening. I hope you have people listening who know about children, because a child will always, or nearly always, leave their body and look at their body from a place apart, like the ceiling looking back down. And I want you all to know that's not just an out-of-body experience. That is a defense mechanism. Any child, when they have a fever, whatever is going on, that child will leave their body, because it's their way to save their soul. It's their way to save their identity. It's their way to save who they are. It's a defense mechanism. So we get a lot of these things in the book, and especially the dark light experience.
Did a lot of your research subjects say that they had past life reviews or saw into their past lives at such a young age?
A few. And I'm going to say a few. There are some drawings, some of them very exact and intricate, that they drew their past life. So I did have a few of those, but very few. And I'm glad you asked that question, because it brings up a different way of viewing things. Remember, these are kids who cannot compare anything. So they're coming in they're coming in still in the light. They're coming in from light-filled worlds, so that they're looking at life as this flow, this incredible light flow. And in that flow, every once in a while, there's a dip. That's a life. And then it comes back up to the flow. And once in a while, there's another dip. And they come back up into the flow. And they really talk a lot about that flow. And the biggest challenge they have in coming into bodies is, what's a body? So one of their biggest challenges is finding out what earth life is like, bodies are like, learning is like, mom and dad is like, brothers and sisters are like, going to school. And invariably, these kids know more than anybody else. They're smart. And I was just floored by how intelligent these youngsters are. And growing up, it's phenomenal how intelligent they are. It's almost as if, well, how do I put this? Most of them, by the time they're in the first grade, are abstracting. I mean that, they're abstracting. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
There's this boy in Georgia, and he drowns. He's about not quite 6 years old. He's in first grade. He drowns about halfway through school. Comes back, and this kid is reading Greek mythology and understands it. And he asked his teacher, who wrote Robinson Crusoe? I mean, like, most kids in the first grade are reading See Spot Run, Dick and Jane. He's coming back reading Greek mythology.
Yeah.
397 people, and 90% of them do not, how do I put this into words? 90% of them do not relate to their parents. They don't bond with their parents. That doesn't mean they don't love them. They can love them, but they don't bond with them. They never bond with them because they're still part of that other world. When they come, when they're in school, they know more than the teacher does. Most of them do. Let me give you some examples here of intelligence. Let me give you some numbers here.
Well, it sounds like for those abilities, they're accessing past life memories.
I cannot validate past life memories. I cannot even validate the word past life. What I can validate is that these people are coming in so filled with light, so filled with intelligence, so filled with knowing that it is as if they are either fully developed consciously or they have a mind that works differently. So we're thinking here in terms of how to look at these people, not in terms of past lives, but in terms of a greater life beyond past lives.
Mm-hmm.
Let me talk then in terms of how they are now. So from birth until about 15 years of age, I'm going to go from birth to about 6 years of age. %48 were scoring between 150 to 160 on standard IQ tests.
Mm.
Those who had a dark light experience instead of a bright light experience were scoring 180 and above when they were finally able to take IQ tests.
What is a dark light experience?
I'm seeing significant enhancement of intelligence. We're talking about lights here.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm finding with kids, the children will describe lights, and they will describe this very raw, piercing, just incredible, powerful light. And then they'll describe this black or dark light. Often it will have maybe purple tinges to it. And then they'll describe this very bright or white light. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
will have gold or silver tinges to it. And when you're talking to adults and they're talking about this very bright or white light experience, they're saying, this is God. This is this incredible power on the other side of life. But the kids are a little different. They talk about this very bright or white light, and they say, well, that's father light.
Hmm.
And they talk about this dark or black light, that's mother light.
Hmm.
And this raw, piercing light, that's God's light.
Hmm.
And they say the bright light, the bright white light, the father light, and the mother light, they come from God's light.
Hmm.
And God's light is the superior light. So, one in particular, and her drawing is in the book, by the way, of her black light experience. Her name is Star. And she tries to draw being in this black light. And she says, what I remember pre-utero was a room with black living walls. There were no words. There were no words exchanged, only thoughts. We were near the end, and I was preparing for my final choice, i.e., she was getting ready to be born. But kids talk about all these kinds of lights, and a child will never use the word angel. A really young child, unless they're introduced to that term by their parents, they will almost always call them the loving ones, the bright ones. These very, very loving people, and they just love. They're just filled with this love when they're coming in, and the kind of changes that that they face when they're very, very little, and the kind of changes that they face coming in. We've talked about abstracting. Many of them come in with stenesthesia. This is very common, even in adults. We have a lot of adults who have stenesthesia, but it's very common with children. Stenesthesia is an elaboration of the limbic system in the brain, where you're coming in with different or multiple sensing abilities. Let me give you an example of stenesthesia. I was born with stenesthesia. No, I wasn't a child near-death experiencer, but I just happened to have been born with it. And I was the only kid in the first grade who could smell color, see music, and hear numbers. That means that I was called a liar over and over and over again in the first grade. The teacher, the principal of the school, they said I was a liar. I was not a liar. I saw everything in that way. Many people with stenesthesia then have different ways of sensing things. That does not mean that they're odd. It doesn't mean they're lying. It doesn't mean they're troubled. They just have a different way of sensing things, and you find that a lot with these near-death kids, and they come in. Let me give you a little bit more about these kids coming in. 70% have very, very vivid dreams. We've got 84% empathic, highly intelligent, 75%. Let me give you 74%. Remember that percentage, 74%. 74% when they grow up are highly intelligent. They become very, very successful. 34% were positive about having an NDE. They were excited about it. But 61% were negative, having had a near-death experience. They didn't like it. We've got here I'm looking at these people It didn't matter whether they were the real young ones or the older ones looking back. We've still got this high percentage that want to go back. We're not looking at a child's eyes. We're not looking at the experience of the child's eyes. We're not looking at how a child thinks. A child thinks, aha, I was in this beautiful, wonderful place, loving people, bright lights, wonderful people, but I wasn't breathing. Now I'm breathing, but that lovely, wonderful place is gone. I want to get back there. All of your, therapists out there, parents out there, anybody who's listening, please get the book, The Forever Angels. There are chapters in there on PTSD, comparing that with NDEs. Let's look at this. My first book that I did on this was The New Children and Near-Death Experiences. And in the back of that book is a lot of resources, how to handle this, how to work with the kids. And believe it or not, the best and easiest and quickest way to handle this phenomenon is just to teach the kids how to do visualizations. That way they can get back, be there, come back again, and they can go back and forth, and they feel good about it. They feel all right about it. It helps a lot with this idea of being lost. This idea of they've lost their home. And it makes a huge, huge difference in this idea. Most near-death experiencers, they're homesick for heaven. They want to go back because they're homesick for heaven. That's all it is.
Makes sense.
It's not that big of a deal, really, yet it is a big deal in the way we respond to it, the way we handle it, what we do with our children. The big thing I want to say here is, I call it out of the mouth of babes syndrome. We adults want to hear. We want to hear what the children are saying. We want to hear these incredible stories out of the mouth of babes. These incredible stories. But how many people go back 10 years later and talk to that same child? How many people go back 15 years later and talk to that same child? What is it? What is it like for them growing up? That's when you get the puzzles. That's when you get the difficulties. What is it like for that child growing up?
All right.
And they're brilliant. But
Well, first of all, you've been researching near death since the 70s. So is it safe to be able to call you the mother of near death experiences?
Well, we call Raymond Moody the father of the near-death experience.
Right.
I suppose you could call me the mother of the after effects.
Okay. What do you think most people who have not had near death experiences, what are their misconceptions about people who have?
If you've had a near-death experience, you don't think the same way you did before. You don't talk the same way you did before. You don't act the same way you did before. So we're getting now into adults, especially, or teenagers. How do you handle yourself? How do you talk? If you've had a near death experience, because once you've had a near death experience, you're different. With some people, certainly more different than others. Especially this idea of love and unconditional love. You get this a lot with adults. Unconditional love. With adults, they're talking so much about how different they are and how incredible life is. And they're, well, look, the divorce rate of adults is somewhere between 71 to 80% within about 5 years of their experience. That's massive.
Yeah.
That's huge. So when we're talking about adults and adult experiencers, and this puzzle, I call it a puzzle about unconditional love. Let me give you some examples here about adults. You want to get my book, near-death experiences, the rest of the story. Adults, they just love everybody. This example, a real estate agent in Southern California, 2 marriages, is in his second marriage. He has children with his second marriage, and his near-death experience, and he's telling me, I've never been so loving. I love my wife more than I could ever love. I love my children more. I love my associates more. I love my the people who come to see me. I love them more than I ever thought I could love. And he's just so excited. And the next year I hear from him again, and he's saying to me, he says, I don't understand this. My children don't want to be seen in the same room with me. My wife turns away from me. My clients, they also are turning away from me.
Wow.
I don't understand this. I'm more loving now than I've ever been, and I'm turning people away from me. Why? And he walks out. I never heard from the man again. I think this big puzzle about unconditional love, we forget that unconditional love, it's God's love. It's agape. It's where you see every woman as your mother, your sister, your daughter, your aunt, every man is your husband, your brother, your son, your uncle. And it's not that it's not that you can't tell them apart. It's just you tend to love them all equally. And that causes so much confusion in families because the spouse, the other one, the spouse, they think you're flirting. They don't understand. They don't understand the differences. Let me give you a little example of my own experience. I have 3 children. My oldest daughter came to me one day. I come from Idaho. I'm a Western woman, Idaho. And we're all plains speakers back in Idaho. Yeah, you get it right away up front. And so my older daughter came to me and she said, well, she had her hands on her hips. She says, well, you're friendlier now than you used to be. And I like talking to you. But you're not mom. And I want mom back. Well, we spent years searching for that woman, never did find her. I don't know what happened to her. It's this idea that you're changed. Some are changed more than others, but many of us are changed remarkably so. What I tell experiencers is the first thing you need to learn after a near-death experiencer. Yeah, you need to learn again how to talk and how to be with people, how to think and how to talk, because you're not the same as you were before. You need to relearn that. In near-death conferences, for instance, we often have rooms or places where the family of experiencers can come, or the spouse can come, and they can learn, then learn about how differently the near-death experience is, how it affects people. And very often, if the family will listen to the experiencer and, just listen to them and tell their story without any judgment, without any criticism, they find out that, hey, they start to change themselves. And it just happens quite often. When the family will just slow down and listen to the experiencer. And hey, I did the same thing in a way with children. I wrote what is called the Animal Light series, and it's a book. It's 6 children's books. It's all animals, different kinds of animals, hedgehogs, fawns, horses, kittens, all different kinds of animals. And the animal then comes from the light, the other worlds, comes into the mama, into her womb, and remembers being in the womb, and then they're born, and about miscarriages and twins and all this kind of thing, and then the children can read the book with mom and mom and dad can say, well, did you can you remember anything like Busy Betty Wiggles? And it opens up that door then for parents to be able to talk to their kids. And, it opens up that memory. What can the child remember about their near-death, about life?
It's a great idea.
About not just near-death experience, but about any child. Being in the womb, being born. How much can any child remember? So the Animal Light series, it's on, Amazon.com. I wrote that for the little kids and the parents, so they can explore.
That's a great idea. You've been involved with near death for so long. What still inspires you about near death to keep you involved with it?
About life. About who we are. What inspires me so much is that these individuals coming back with new or enhanced abilities, new or enhanced memories. It's as if we are co-creators with the Creator. It's as if we are, it's as if we are so enhanced by just allowing ourselves to be who we really are. That just thrills me. To realize how incredible the human being is. The soul of each and every one of us. How powerful we all really are. That just thrills me to no end. How vast life is. On any plane, in any dimension, how vast life is. Yeah. That thrills me even today.
Oh, that's great. Do you interact with the public? Do you have a Facebook page? Do you have a website if people want to ask you questions? Or are you more of a...
All of that and above. 18 books. Yes. My website, www.PMH Atwater. So it's my name.com. I produce a free monthly newsletter.
Oh, great.
You can get on my website, www.PMHAtwater.com. You get into the newsletter section. There is an archive there. You can go back and go over previous issues. I I tell everybody my newsletter is only for the curious. So if you're not curious, you won't like my newsletter. But if you're curious, you're just going to love it. It covers all kinds of things. And of course, you know, I have book sales certainly on my website. I have charts. I have articles. I have all kinds of material on my website. So you're just gonna love exploring. PMHAtwater.com.
Do you have any new projects that you're working on that you want us to know about?
Well, I've started my 19th book. And it's a book about my life, my death, my research. And it's a book like no other. I've never written a book like this before, and it's scary, and it's very scary. Yeah. How do I even talk about it? I really can't talk about it, except to say, this is the book where I reveal everything that I can about what I've seen and what I've learned and what it means.
Well, I know you can't talk about it, but you know, you've really got me curious when you're saying it's scary. So what is so scary about this? At least can you give us a hint?
Being open, stay completely and totally open. You know, having a near-death experience changes you in remarkable ways. It turns you around. It introduces you to worlds without end. And when you come back, it's really a challenge to accept the life you're living now, to accept the life you have, realizing what that life really is. It's so much more than you can possibly describe. I don't know what else I can say.
I don't think you have to say anything else.
It's just more.
All right, PMH, before we wrap it up here, can you give us one last message to carry on with us?
The near-death experience really shows us how incredibly vast and wonderful we all are. It shows us, it shows us all that there really is a higher source. You can call it God. You can call it one. I don't care what you call it. There really is a higher source or force. There really is a reason and purpose for life. There really is incredible vastness to all that we are and could be and want to be and can be. Don't believe any limitation. We are more. We are bigger and better than we could ever dream that we are. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, PMH, I really appreciate you being a guest with me. I appreciate you giving me some of your time, and I wish you massive success with this next book.
Thank you.
And I need to get
it's
when it's finished, I need to get you back on so we can talk about it. So you can come on and you can come on and scare us. I'm just kidding.
It would scare you. It would. You betcha. Jeff, you've just been wonderful. You've been wonderful.
Well, thank you. You are a terrific guest.
Well, I'm sorry for all the hesitations. It would be wonderful if my words and voice flowed better. This would be absolutely great. But sometimes I get sort of stuck.
That's okay.
And you're so patient. And you know, I thank you.
Well, I thank you. I double thank you, because without you, I would have no podcast.
Okie doke.
All right. Well, you have a great evening and happy holidays to you.
And you as well. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.